It's time to talk about my best and worst reads of 2025. So I was making like a list, two lists, one of my best reads and one of my worst reads, and I ended up with like 10 best reads. But when I was making my worst reads list, I only ended up with 7 books, and I honestly could not really put any more books. Like, I was trying, but I just could not make that list any longer. So I was like, okay, let's just make it only 7 books. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that means I have not read that many terrible books in 2025. But obviously, some of the books on my worst list might be a little controversial. But reading is subjective, and these books didn't work for me personally. Also, none of them are like 1 stars. They are like either 2 or 3 stars. So they're not even like that terrible. Some of the books on my worst list might be on someone else's 5-star list. Like I said, reading is subjective, and these are just my own personal opinions. I think let's start with some positivity, and let's start with my top 10 reads of 2025. In no particular order, because trying to organize them, like trying to choose the best one, like it's just too much. It's like trying to choose a favorite child. I feel like it's too much. I feel like all of them are just so good. All of them deserve a spot on this list. So this list does not have any particular order. It's not a ranking. It's just a list, okay? Without further ado, let's get started. Well, actually, before we get into the top 10 books, I wanted to mention 2 books that I reread this year that I love so much. But because they are rereads, I decided not to put them in this list. But I still want to mention them because they are amazing reads. The first book I reread was Studying Drowning. I was rereading it before jumping into the sequel. The atmosphere in the story is unreal, and Ava Reid's writing is so rich and vivid. One of the things I love about this book the most is the protagonist, Effie. I love her because of how relatable she is. Like, I've read so many books, but I feel like she is one of the characters that I identify with the most. Like, she has so much like anxiety and self-doubt and trauma and love for books, and I just feel like seeing her grow as a character was like really moving and empowering at the same time. And also, I love her relationship with Preston. It's kind of like rivals to lovers trope, but their relationship is just like so tender and respectful. I love their relationship so much. This book in general is just such a perfect blend of fantasy, dark academia, and mystery, and it also includes like some feminist themes. It's kind of slow paced, but it's never boring. I think at least I was never bored. I think I was just really enchanted by all of the beautiful descriptions. And even when I was reading it for the second time, even though like I already knew where the story goes, I still was not bored at all. I still love this book so much. Then I also reread the Six of Crows duology. This year I also got these like special editions. These are collector's editions. The reason I got them is because it is my favorite duology of all time. I don't think I will ever read books that I will love as much as these 2. This duology just always makes me feel so many things. There's so much tension and action, but there's also, a bit of humor. There's also a bit of romance. There's also so much pain. But definitely the thing that makes this duology so special to me is the characters. Like, each one is just so unique and so likable, and together they come, as this amazing team, and they go on to perform this impossible heist It's just literally the most intense and gut-wrenching fantasy series I've ever read, with the most unique, amazing characters ever. Like, I would sell my soul to forget this series and read it again for the first time. So these were the books that I reread, that I still recommend. And now let's move on to the actual list of my top 10 best reads of 2025. First up, we've got The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This year I read the entire trilogy. This is the sequel in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. But out of all the 3 books, this one is definitely my favorite. It just hit me the hardest. I was honestly not prepared for how much more intense, emotional, and magical this sequel would be. I just feel like the world that Stephanie Garber has built in the series just feels like a dream that you don't want to wake up from. It feels so magical and immersive. And obviously I love the characters. I love Evangeline. She is like kind of like the soft protagonist. You know, she's definitely different from your like regular badass protagonist from like an average fantasy novel. She has the soft energy to her, but does not mean that she's weak. She is definitely strong, but she just has the soft energy to her. And of course, we've got Jax, the Prince of Hearts. I love him so much, and the chemistry between him and Evangeline is off the charts. Especially in the second book, like there's like this longing, you know, this slow burn tension, and the moments when you know like they care about each other, but they just don't want to admit it. Oh my goodness, it had me screaming. It's such a good romantasy series, and also it does not have like any spice. So if you want a good romantasy series without spice, I can definitely recommend this entire trilogy. Next, we've got The Secret History, which is like, you know, the mother of all dark academia books. Yeah, I think I was definitely like a little bit nervous to pick it up because I was not sure what I would think about it, but I ended up being obsessed. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it is a little bit slow and the chapters are really long, but it's so unsettling and haunting and full of like morally questionable characters. And it felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. In a way, like I just couldn't look away. You know, I had this morbid curiosity inside of me. I think it is considered also like thriller genre-wise, but it's different from like your regular thriller because right from the beginning, you know, like who is going to die and you know who is responsible. That might feel like that should kill all the suspense, but no, that actually makes the tension even worse, I think. Because like you're not really wondering what will happen, you're just watching everything unfold, you know, very slowly, very painfully, and you're just wondering how it gets that bad. But what really stuck with me was not the crime itself, but it was just like the emotional and psychological unraveling that followed the crime. So if you don't know, this book focuses on like a group of these like classics students. They are kind of like pretentious and deeply flawed. You really feel like you don't like them, but also in a way you feel fascinated by them, or at least that's how I felt. Like I was like feeling I don't like these people, but in a way I'm so fascinated by them and I want to keep reading. The writing is also like really atmospheric and immersive. I feel like the setting also adds this kind of like claustrophobic, isolating vibe that fits the story. And even when nothing big is happening, you kind of feel this tension at all times. It's really such a haunting book. I feel like it's not going to be for everyone. I know that some people found it boring. You really have to be interested in like the psychological aspect of it all, I think, in order to like really be fascinated by this book and in order to enjoy reading this book. If you are into like more psychological books and dark academia books, then yeah, I can definitely recommend this book. Then we've got a horror book, which is like kind of like a modern dark fairy tale. And I picked it up mainly because of the beautiful, unsettling cover. The book is called House of Hollow. And, I ended up staying for the eerie vibes and the really unsettling mystery. I was actually creeped out when I was reading this book. I remember like looking over my shoulder to make sure like no one is behind me. It is really quite eerie and creepy. It talks about these three sisters that go missing as children, but sometime later they return. But they return like changed in a way. There's something a little off about them. And many, many years later, one of the sisters goes missing again. Now, the youngest sister, wants to find her sister, and she also wants to find out what happened to them, like what happened when they disappeared as children, because they don't really remember anything. They don't know what happened to them when they were gone. So this is the mystery that she is trying to unravel, and it gets really dark and crazy. I'm not gonna lie, the plot twist really made my jaw drop. If you like books that are beautifully written, but also, really haunting and a little twisted, then I think I can recommend House of Hollow. It's such a good horror book. It's YA, by the way. It's YA horror, but it's so good. Next, we've got funny story. So this year I started reading Emily Henry. I read like 3 books by her, but this one was definitely my favorite. It ended up being a total 5-star read, and I totally get the Emily Henry hype now. In this book, we follow Daphne. Daphne is left by her fiance, and she ends up living together with the ex of the girl that her fiance left her for. I know it sounds like very strange and very complicated, but honestly, it was just such a good story with such compelling characters. I love Daphne. I just feel like she was so relatable, and I felt so hard for Miles. Like, Miles is the love interest. He's just like soft, funny, and emotionally intelligent, and the kind of guy that I feel like every girl would fall for in real life. It's actually very funny because this book has like fake dating trope, which is a trope that I usually am not the biggest fan of. But it kind of works in this case. Like, it does not feel like cringy or stupid. I don't know. I actually enjoyed the way Emily Henry did this trope in this book. It also has this forced proximity because obviously they are roommates. I also love the small town setting. Waning Bay, which is where they lived, it felt like so peaceful and welcoming. It felt like the kind of place where someone could actually like start over and find their people and just be happy, and it felt really comforting to read about. Well, I don't know what else to say. This book made me feel so good, and I definitely will want to reread it at some point. Definitely, if you want to try out Emily Henry, I would start with Funny Story. Next, we've got the book that emotionally wrecked me. The Song of Achilles. In this book, the author retells the story of Achilles through the eyes of Patroclus, who is like his, companion. But in this interpretation, the author makes Patroclus Achilles' lover. So she turns this great Greek myth into an intimate love story. I especially liked the early parts of the book where we see Achilles and Patroclus as they like grow up together, because these parts are like obviously a lot more peaceful. That is like before all the wars started and everything. So they just like grow up together and fall in love slowly, and I loved these slow and tender moments between them. It was definitely my favorite part of the entire book. Madeline Miller's writing is like really beautiful and poetic, and she manages to make this story just deeply intimate and personal, and she makes these, Greek heroes just feel human, basically. And I feel like even if you don't know a ton about Greek mythology, do not let that discourage you. I feel like this book is very accessible. You really do not need to know much about Greek mythology. But even if you do know the myth and how it ends and everything, I feel like this is still worth reading because, well, obviously we see the story through Patroclus' eyes, and in the original myth, Patroclus is kind of like a side character, but here he's like the heart of the story. So this retelling definitely changes everything. It really changes the perspective of the story. In general, it was a beautiful and tragic retelling, and it's the type of book that I will never forget. Next is Rebel Witch, which is the sequel to Heartless Hunter. The sequel absolutely delivered. Unfortunately, I don't have a physical copy yet. I read it on my Kindle, but I feel like I loved this duology so much that I do need to purchase physical copy to add to my bookshelves. So that's definitely on my to buy list. But for now, yeah, let's talk about this duology. So after reading the first book, Heartless Hunter, I was not completely sold. I gave it 4 stars. I was like, yeah, it was enjoyable, but it was not anything spectacular. Then I read the second book and I was like, oh yeah, this is what a good fantasy book is like. This sequel completely blew me away and made me fall in love with this series. The action ramps up and never lets go right from the first chapter. Like, this is just such a fast-paced and action-packed fantasy novel. Like, you just cannot even catch a breath because something is happening all the time. The stakes are incredibly high and just everything feels so intense all the time. So what definitely stood out to me compared to the first book was the romance. I feel like in the first book, I don't know, it felt like the romance was a little bit rushed, maybe. But now, when I was reading the sequel, I feel like the romance finally clicked. But also, both of these characters, both Rune and Gideon, they have grown so much. And I feel like that also adds to the romance being a lot more enjoyable, especially Gideon. He has grown so much as a character. So the romance definitely feels a lot more like genuine. What also made this sequel better than the first book was that the author really expanded the world building. I feel like the author added a lot more magic, a lot more politics and history, and just everything was expanded in such a nice way. So it made this whole story feel just, a lot more rich and interesting. And yeah, like I said, this was the turning point for me with the series, and it gave me everything I wanted, action, emotion, romance, and it really solidified my love for this duology. I would say if you end up reading Heartless Hunter and you're not sure whether you want to continue, I would say go for it, because I think the sequel is way better. Though I still think Heartless Hunter was a good book. But the sequel, chef's kiss. Next, we've got the newest release by one of my favorite authors of all time, Holly Jackson. This year, well, last year now, because it's 2026. Last year, she came out with a book called Not Quite Dead Yet, and she destroyed me with this book. I think this might be like my second favorite book by Holly Jackson. I think so. I think my number one is still A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but this one is a close second. It was such a good read. It is her first adult thriller, but I must admit it still has very strong YA vibes. So I'd say do not expect like regular adult thriller. It still has quite strong YA vibes. I personally didn't mind that, but if someone is really looking for like adult thriller, they might feel like, okay, it feels a little like YA. But okay, let's talk about the premise, because the premise itself is wild. In this book, we follow Jet, who is attacked on Halloween night. And she is really like injured quite badly. And she learns that she has like only 1 week left to live. She can also undergo surgery, but the survival rate is not looking good. So she would most likely die during surgery. I mean, of course, there is a small chance that she could survive, but she decides to not take this risk. What she decides to do instead is she decides to take this one final week of her life, and she decides to find the person who attacked her, because she did not see the attacker. She has no idea who did this to her. So essentially, she's trying to solve her own murder, which is a crazy concept. It's really so unique and interesting, and I was just sold on the idea alone. Jet is definitely one of the most compelling protagonists I've read in a thriller. I often do struggle with like rooting for characters in thrillers, and that's what often makes me like hard to enjoy the thrillers. But it was not this thriller. I really enjoyed the protagonist Jet. She's like tough and sarcastic, but also deeply vulnerable at the same time. Her inner voice is like sharp and funny. I was really rooting for her so much. And I also liked her relationship with Billy. So Billy is like her, I think he was her childhood friend, who is also kind of helping her solve this case. I loved their moments together, like these small tender moments. He was just so good to her, even when like her own family wasn't. I loved them together so much. Oh my god, why do I feel like I'm about to cry? Just whenever I think about this book, I do feel like crying, but okay. I feel like it was a gripping and emotional read with a dark mystery at its core. Actually, I did predict like the final twist at one point, but there's like actually a lot of twists and revelations at this, throughout the book. And obviously, like there's no way that you can predict all of them. There were still so many shocking things that made my jaw drop. So I was still really hooked, and I still think that this book deserves 5 stars. And like I said, I do love how emotional it made me feel, because it was full of suspense and tension, but at the same time, I was really emotionally invested, which does not often happen when I read thrillers. So I do appreciate that Holly Jackson managed to, write these wonderful characters and write this extremely emotional story. And she basically wrote a thriller that will make you cry. Next is this book, Anxious People. And this book I don't know, I feel like it changed me in a way. It's like funny, it's sad, it's hopeful all at once. In a way, I feel like it's a book that everyone should read at least once in their lives. The setup definitely sounds chaotic. It talks about this failed bank robber who, like, accidentally, I guess, takes a bunch of people hostage during an apartment viewing. But, instead of it turning into like a suspenseful thriller or something like that, it turns into this beautiful story of, life, regret, anxiety, and human connection, which I feel like that's the most important part of this book, the human connection part. I'm not gonna lie, at first I did struggle with liking these characters, but as their stories unfolded, I really grew attached to them. And in the end, I really felt like I cared deeply for each of them. They just feel like so real in a human way. They are like messy, flawed, maybe a little bit annoying, but they just feel like real and human. Frederick Backman's writing balances heavy themes with enough humor to keep this book from being too dark or too overwhelming. The plot jumps around in time, which can feel disjointed at first, but once everything clicks into place, it makes sense and it feels satisfying in a way. Overall, it's just a book about being human. That's what I would say. This book will remind you that we're all just human and we're all just trying our best to survive. And we're all going through something, even if we're not always showing it. And this book will also teach you empathy. So that's why I think everyone should read it. It is such a good book. Then we've got a Christmas read that I obviously read very recently during Christmas. It's called Good Spirits. It was such a perfect festive read. It is a romance, but it's, a little bit different from any regular Christmas romance. It has this paranormal twist to it. Our protagonist, Harriet, is visited by this ghost of Christmas past. His name is Nolan. And Harriet, she has spent her whole life feeling like an afterthought. She just kind of does what is expected, puts others first, and just she just feels like no one really chooses her, even though she's trying her best. She just feels like no one really loves her or chooses her. Reading her story just felt so personal. I saw so much of myself in her sadness and her people-pleasing tendencies. And I loved watching her slowly reclaim her voice. Then we've also got Nolan, the ghost, who's also, very lonely. I mean, he is a ghost. People usually don't remember ghosts. They can see them, but they don't remember them. The only people that he's allowed to talk to are the people that he is supposed to guide through their past memories. But usually, they're not very good people. Usually he doesn't really feel any connection with them until Harriet. With Harriet, something's different. They do form sort of a connection. Their relationship is just full of soft humor and banter, and it is a very slow burn type of relationship. It is very beautiful, and I loved seeing them just slowly fall in love with each other and just realize that they don't have to be so lonely because there is someone out there who loves them and who would literally do everything for them. It is definitely an emotional type of read. It was very emotional. It was just such a perfect Christmas read. I feel like definitely in the future I will want to reread this book because of how much I loved it. Lastly, we've got All In by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. It is part of the Naturals series. So I started reading this series in 2024, and then I continued reading it in 2025. So in 2025, I read All In, and then it was what was the last book called? Bad Blood, and then the novella. The last book was a little disappointing, but this book, I think it might have been my favorite in the entire series. It was so good. I mean, just the Natural series in general is one of my favorite YA thriller series of all time. It was so freaking good. This is the third book in the series, so I just feel like at this point I really grew so attached to these characters. So whatever they were doing, I was just so involved. But also, this book in general, like the reveals were very smart. It was really fast paced, really engaging. Yeah, like I said, I do think it was my favorite book in the entire series. If you do not know what this series is about, it's basically about a group of teenagers who basically have like some special abilities, and because of that, they like solve cold cases for the FBI. They also end up like being a target of like an active case, like an active killer. So it's not just about cold cases. It gets like really, really intense. It is a very good series, so I highly, highly recommend it. These were my top reads of 2025. Now let's move on to my worst reads. First, we've got None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. So I'll try to say some nice things, like what I liked about these books, so that, these opinions are not entirely negative. This book was definitely really eerie and unsettling, and I do think that the characters were actually very well written. What I mean by that is just like they just felt realistic in how like complex and flawed and unpredictable they felt. The format of the book was interesting too, because it also has these like podcast transcripts and some documentary clips, and all of that just, added this immersive layer to the story. But I was not shocked by most of the reveals. I literally predicted most of them. And if you just look at the title of the book, I feel like it gives away a lot. I feel like the title should have been changed for sure. Also, the ending was really strange. It just felt like a lot of things were left unresolved and like not explained. And I just finished the book feeling like really, really unsatisfied. Also, there was this very icky relationship that was portrayed in this book. And now thrillers do tend to portray some like, stuff that can make people uncomfortable. So that's not my issue. My issue is just how it was portrayed. So we had this little child that got into a relationship with a man that was in his 40s. Gross. And my issue is that it was kind of glossed over, and I feel like the author made it feel like it was the little girl's fault. Like she was just so evil and manipulative, and she manipulated this grown ass man into a relationship with her. And I'm like, what do you mean? He chose to be in this relationship. He married her, he had a child with her. No matter how evil or manipulative she was just a child, and he got into a relationship with her. It just felt like there was like literally no responsibility put on that man, even though he groomed this little girl, and that definitely left a lot of trauma on her. That also definitely influenced her like personality later in life, and it just didn't sit right with me. Okay, so there's that. Another book that I did not really enjoy, it's another thriller called Never Lie. Again, I did think that it was quite eerie and unsettling, which was a good thing, but I did think that the writing was not great at all. The characters were not only unlikable, but they were also like really uninteresting. I mean, sometimes the characters are not necessarily likable, but at least they are like quite fascinating to read about. I feel like that was the case for None of This Is True. So, like, even though, I didn't like other things, I still thought that the characters were well written. But in this book, the characters were not well written. They were like really uninteresting and dull. And also, like, some of their actions just kind of like made no sense or were inconsistent, in my opinion. I do also have like one very particular opinion about the way this book is written. But I feel like if I say it, it's going to spoil the whole book. And some people might still want to read it, regardless. I do not want to spoil it. So yeah, I do not think that this book should have been written in the first person. That's all I'm gonna say. And also, okay, the plot twists were kind of surprising, but also way too unrealistic. It's kind of wild how much went down without anyone, not even police, like seeming to notice anything or ask any questions. Like, I know police can be pretty shitty at their job, but I mean, to this degree, like, it seems so ridiculous. I also did not like the ending. It felt really unsatisfying and far-fetched. So if you are looking for something fast-paced to kill a few hours, sure, you might want to read this one, or even None of This Is True, which was what I previously mentioned. But yeah, I feel like both of those books just left me more frustrated than impressed in a way. But I still think that None of This Is True was maybe slightly better written. Like, Never Lie was just generally badly written, and like not much can save this book. Okay, so I just had some dinner, but I'm back to talk about the worst books I read in 2025. So I noticed there's a lot of thrillers on this list. So I'll talk about something that is not a thriller. We've got this book called The Book of Autumn. It was actually a digital ARC that I received through NetGalley, but it was really difficult to get through. I almost DNF'd it. I was definitely drawn in by the premise. It talks about some magical disturbances at this remote academy, and there's like these two exes that team up to investigate some of these disturbances. And I do like that, even though it is a dark academia book, the setting is actually in the New Mexico desert. So I feel like it is something that's like very unique and different, because usually when we think dark academia, we think of these like really gothic, dark settings and like these moody castles or misty forests. But no, here we've got a New Mexico desert. Like, that is such, a unique combination. So I did love that. It sounded so original and I was really excited, but yeah, it just ended up not being great. I feel like it leans really hard into like sounding scholarly, and at times it just felt more like reading some strange research paper rather than reading a fantasy novel. And it had so many footnotes, like truly constant footnotes, completely disrupted my reading flow. It's like one thing to, sprinkle some footnotes to add some context, but this book went all in, and it just made it hard to stay engaged with the actual story. Even like side characters' thoughts were also added as footnotes. It was just so hard to read, honestly. The romance was also really flat. I feel like there's just zero chemistry. I really wanted to love this book, but I almost DNF'd it. I did end up reading it till the end, but reading it felt like a chore. Okay, the next thing is a romance book. It's called Out on a Limb. And again, there are some things that I actually liked about this book, but there are some things that I really didn't like. Okay, what I definitely liked was like the gentle, selfless love between the main characters. It's just like their relationship is full of care and emotional healing, and just that is something I really appreciate in the romance. This book also has like disability representation, so that is something that I also really appreciated, because it was done like a very thoughtful and respectful way. And it just was integrated in the story in a way that felt natural. It's clear that the author approached these sensitive topics with lots of care. So these are the things I loved. But, I had a hard time with like the actual execution. First of all, this book was so slow and the plot was extremely low stakes. Like when I was reading it, it felt like I was being put to sleep. It was a little too soft for my personal taste and nothing was happening, and I kept waiting for like something more, some like deeper conflict, but like it just didn't happen. It was just low stakes all the time. And definitely the writing style did not help. There were a lot of cringy lines. Some of them just made me want to crawl under the bed from secondhand embarrassment. The humor also, like, it was not really for me. I don't know. I found it really cringy, not necessarily funny. And also the spicy scenes, I didn't really like the way they were written. It felt like reading like a badly written Wattpad fanfiction. The idea for the book and like the message and the emotional core were strong, but the execution, was not good, especially the writing. So I feel like the writing definitely was like what I liked the least about this book, and I'm not even sure if I want to read other books by this author. Okay, the next one is yet another thriller in yet another digital arc that I received through NetGalley. And this book, like, it was not necessarily bad. I just feel like it was really forgettable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, I literally don't remember almost anything about this book. The premise of the book is that the protagonist Eve is clearing out her late father's house when she finds a box of cassette tapes. And one of them is labeled with her name. And when she plays it, she hears her missing mother's voice. And she says something like, if you're listening to this, that means I've been murdered. Something like that. So, okay, the premise is quite interesting, right? I feel like definitely like the pacing was off. Like the beginning dragged a little bit and then the ending kind of came on too fast. Some of the twists felt a little bit unrealistic, like they were just added for shock value rather than, organically emerging from the story. I also found all of the characters, including the main character Eve, pretty flat. Like I said, really forgettable. I could not tell you like anything about any of these characters because I don't remember. That's how forgettable they were. I just didn't really feel like emotionally connected to this story or any of the characters, and I think that's why I didn't really enjoy this book. And it just didn't really leave a strong impression on me. Okay, 2 more books to go. Next is yet another thriller. Oh my god, so many thrillers on this list. That's Not My Name. And this one, I really thought that I will enjoy it. It had super promising setup. And at first I was really, really intrigued by this book. So it opens with a girl who wakes up with no memory at all. It's kind of like a classic thriller setup. And she is taken by this man who's claiming to be her father. Instant mystery, instant unease, because she does not remember anything, so she does not know if this man is truly her father. He's got all the documentation and everything, but she still feels a little unsettled. But he's got all the documentation, so what can the police do? They obviously give him the girl. There's also a second POV. There's like a boy searching for his missing girlfriend, which gave the story like another layer. I liked how these perspectives eventually like wove together into one story. But as much as I wanted to love it, there were some things that held me back. Definitely some of the character decisions didn't make sense and just felt like they were kind of plot convenient, if you know what I mean. I also guessed a few of the like major twists, which took some of the impact out of the ending personally. It was just one of those stories where I was waiting for like a bigger wow moment, like a bigger shocking reveal, and it just never came. There were also a few plot holes and just some situations felt unrealistic, and that just kind of pulled me out of the story. I don't need thrillers to be 100% believable, but I don't know, some things just didn't land for me. I still think that it was actually probably out of this entire list, this book was still the best. And I still think that you might want to give it a chance. It was not the worst thriller ever. It was still very dark and unsettling. But yeah, there were just some things that made it less enjoyable for me. Okay, and now we've come to the last book on this list finally. This one might be very controversial, but I was contemplating if I should put it on this list, but I was like, you know what? Whatever, let's go. It's Fourth Wing. It's not like I hated this book, but I definitely didn't enjoy it that much, and I definitely don't understand all the appeal and the hype behind this book. Like, okay, the concept of like the dragon riding war college, pretty cool. I did like the dragons that were portrayed in this book because they had like their own distinct personalities. I did find that to be very cool, but I just feel like being in the protagonist's head was a little exhausting at times. Like, especially, every time she saw Zayden, I don't know, like, they were acting like some feral animals around each other. Like, okay, I get it, he's hot, but like, relax. It was like a little too much for me, all the attraction towards each other. It was a bit funny at times. But also, like, the world building was ambitious, but maybe even a little too ambitious. There were just so many, like, names, and like everything was just thrown at us so quickly that it just got overwhelming pretty soon. I also feel like the writing style didn't always match the fantasy setting. Like, there was just, I don't know, just felt like kind of really modern in a way. I don't know, it just felt like it didn't really fit this fantasy, like, dragon riding war college setting, at least in my opinion. I don't think that the writing was, like, amazing, okay? It was not terrible, but especially the dialogue, and just the whole book felt way too long. Definitely some of the scenes could have been just cut out without losing like anything essential. It was just such a long book that was like hard to get through. I did end up giving it 3 stars, by the way, so like I'm saying I didn't hate it, but compared to other books I read last year, it was one of the worst ones, surprisingly. Well, something that I also enjoyed was definitely like the friendships and the group dynamics. I feel like it added a lot of like warmth to the story, and it helped balance the high stakes tension. I could just name so many more fantasy series that are way more worth the hype, this hype that the Fourth Wing got. I don't know why I did get all this hype. I also did not continue this series. Like, I told myself that I will continue it, but because I didn't enjoy it that much, it's really hard for me to motivate myself to read the second book. Let me know, is the second book any better? I don't know if I should continue this series or just ditch it altogether. Like, I'm really on the fence in here, so let me know. This was the last book on this list. So these were my best and worst reads of 2025. Let me know your best and worst reads in the comments down below. I'm definitely curious to see what everyone else enjoyed and also what everyone else hated. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you're interested in more videos like that, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would definitely appreciate that. And Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!